An old king stands at a high window in a palace cut from black stone, and he is not looking at his kingdom. He is looking past it, past the rooftops and the bridge and the slow grey river below, all the way to the far bank where a low green hill sits alone against the snow. There is nothing on it, no banner, no guard, no gold, just a mound of earth raised in the old way, the way his people raised them before any of this, before the cities, before the crown, before the long war that made his name a thing children are taught to fear. He looks at the hill the way you look, in the middle of the night, to be sure a door you left open is still open. He is checking that it is still there. He built this entire city so that this one window would face that one hill. There is a name on the axe in the old king's hand, a single word in a language that barely exists anymore. The boy who chose that word gave it long before the thing it describes had happened. He did not know, when he named it, that he was naming his own death. Hold on to that. By the time we come back to this window, and we will come back to it, you will understand grief and the strange shapes it builds, a little differently than you do right now. Before there was a king at a window, there were only refugees in boats. This is the part the songs tend to skip, because it does not sound like the beginning of a conquest. It sounds like an ending. Far across the cold water, north of everything, there was a land called Atmora. In the old elven tongue, the name meant elder wood, and the people who lived there called it the land of truth. It was a green place once, green in the way only a cold land can be, dense forest pressing down to a hard grey shore, the smell of pine and wood smoke, long blue evenings that never quite went fully dark. It was the first home. Every man and woman who would ever call themselves a Nord, every Imperial in the warm south, every Breton in the western hills, all of them, if you follow the blood back far enough, came from that one frozen forest at the top of the world. And it was tearing itself apart. A civil war had taken Atmora, clan against clan, hall against hall, the kind of slow, grinding violence that does not end so much as exhaust everyone inside it. And so people began to leave. Not as warriors, as families, in longboats, with whatever they could carry, rowing south across a sea so cold and so haunted by drowned things that it would eventually earn a name of its own. They were not invaders. They were people running from a home that had stopped being safe, looking for somewhere quiet enough to raise their children. One of them was a man named Ysgramor. He came with his two sons, Ingol, the elder, and Ilgar, the younger. And he came, the records are careful to say, seeking no violence at all. He wanted to see the new land. He wanted somewhere to live. When his boats finally scraped ashore on the far northern coast of a vast green continent, the people already living there were not men. They were mer, elves, tall and pale and ancient, with a civilization older and stranger than anything the Atmorans had ever built. The newcomers named the whole continent after them. Merith, the land of the mer. You name a place after the people you find there when you mean to be guests, not owners. And for a while, and this is the detail that breaks my heart every time, for a while it worked. Men and elves lived alongside one another in something close to peace. The settlers built, the elves watched, and the world did not end. The people who would one day erase an entire elven civilization from the earth arrived on its shores as the displaced, the grieving, the simply tired, looking for nothing more than somewhere to begin again. More boats came. That was the problem, though no one understood it as a problem at first. Word travels, even across a haunted sea. Atmora was still bleeding, and Merith was green and open and at peace, so more Atmorans followed Ysgramor's example. They came in ones and twos, and then in dozens, and the human settlements grew and grew, and a city rose in the snowfields of the north, the first true city of men in this new world. They called it Saarthal. It was the largest thing humanity had ever built in Merith, the capital of everything they were becoming, and from a distance, in the long winter dark, its fires must have looked like a promise. We are here now. We are staying. This is ours. The elves watched the fires multiply, and they did the arithmetic that frightened peoples have always done. There were more men every season, fewer elves. The newcomers were not slowing down. And somewhere in the cold calculus of who would still be here in 100 years, a decision was made that would unmake 2 civilizations instead of 1. What exactly the elves found, or feared, beneath Saarthal, what was buried there, what power slept under the first city of men, the world has never fully agreed on. Something was down there. The settlers had dug too deep and found something old, and the elves wanted it gone, or wanted the men gone before they understood what they were sitting on. The truth of it lies under a great deal of snow and a great deal of time. But whatever the reason, the elves came to Saarthal in the night, not to drive the men out, to erase them. It happened in a single night, and the night has a name, and the name tells you everything about how it was remembered. They called it the Night of Tears. When the dawn came, the first city of men was ash, and almost every soul who had lived in it was dead. Out of an entire city, a whole people's first great hope in a new world, 3 were known to have lived: a father and his 2 sons. The rest of them never even woke. They took the last boat. Picture it, because the people who first told this story never let you look away from it. 1 longboat, riding low in freezing water, pulling away from a coastline that is on fire. 3 men aboard, a father and 2 sons. And behind them, shrinking, the orange glow of everything they came here to build. Ysgramor sat at the back of that boat and watched Saarthal burn across the water, and according to those who carried the tale forward, the grief that came over him in that moment was not the loud kind. It was the kind that lays a man down. He could not speak. He could barely sit upright. He had crossed a sea to escape one dying home, found a new one, and watched it die too, in a single night, with nearly everyone he had brought with him inside it. And his elder son, Ingol, sat beside him through that long, dark crossing, and did something with his hands. Ingol was a smith. While his father lay broken on the deck, and the fire faded behind them, and the cold sea hissed against the hull, the son worked through the night. And when Ysgramor woke the next morning, his son put a weapon into his hands. An axe. The song that carries this moment says it plainly. It was an axe hewn from the sorrow that had laid him low the night before, forged out of the grief itself, made somehow from the worst night of his father's life. Ysgramor took it, and he wept, in joy and sorrow and rage all at once, the way you can only weep over a gift from your child. And he gave the axe a name. He called it Wuthrad. In the old tongue of Atmora, Wuthrad means storm's tears. Hold that name. I am going to ask you to carry it through everything that comes next, because right now it is only a beautiful, sad name for a beautiful, sad object, a son's gift to a grieving father, christened with a word about weeping and weather. That is all it is, on the deck of that boat. It will not stay that way. There is a reason this axe became the most sacred object in the history of an entire people. And the reason is not the one they tell at the feasts. The reason is sitting right there beside Ysgramor on that deck, 16 years old, or 20 or whatever he was, wiping the cold from his hands, not knowing what he has just named. There were 3 of them now. There would soon be 500. Ysgramor turned the boat the only direction left to turn, back north, back across the haunted water, home to dying Atmora. Not to stay, to gather. He went hall to hall through the burning country he had fled, and he told them what the elves had done at Sarthal, and he asked the bravest of them to come back south with him and answer it. And they came. They came until there were 500. 500 warriors, men and women both, the fiercest the old country had left to give. History would remember them by that number forever. The 500 companions. It is worth slowing down here, because it is easy to hear 500 warriors and picture a faceless army. They were not faceless. The songs that survive name them, crew by crew, ship by ship, with a tenderness that has nothing to do with war. There was a man called Jeek of the River, Ysgramor's own childhood friend, who would captain the ship called Jorvaska. There were twins who fought side by side, one of them with a girth no one dared mention to his face. There was a man known only as the Smiler. There were brothers and shield partners and people who had grown up together in the same frozen villages, who signed onto the same boats so they could die, if it came to that, beside someone whose name they knew. And it mattered who was leading them, because the man at the front of this army was no longer just a settler who wanted somewhere quiet to live. The grief had changed him into something the new world had no name for yet. He carried that axe everywhere now. Through the entire campaign to come, the songs say, the only weapon that ever truly fit his hand was Wuthrad, as if, having been given it on the worst night of his life, he could no longer set it down. He had 2 sons left to him when he stood up off that deck. One of them, the younger, Ilgar, would help him gather the army and command a ship of his own. The other was the boy with the hammer, who would sail again. Down in the south of Atmora sat a port city called Julkurfik, famous for its shipyards, and there the great fleet was built. Boat after boat of Atmoran timber, the wood of the homeland itself, shaped to carry its children one more time across the sea of ghosts. Among those ships were the Jorvaska and the Darumzu, and one called the Harak. Remember the Harak. It does not look important yet. None of the saddest things ever do the first time you see them. And here is something they could not have known as the fleet pushed off from Julkurfik, oars biting into black water, 500 warriors singing across the deep toward vengeance. Behind them, the land they were leaving had already begun, very quietly, to die. Not from war, from cold. A cold that was coming for Atmora itself, and would not stop until there was nothing left of the elder wood but ice. They thought they were rowing toward a war. They were also rowing away from a home none of them would ever be able to return to. They simply could not feel it yet, the way you cannot feel a door closing somewhere behind you in a house you are leaving for the last time. They were the children of a storm goddess, sailing into the storm, and the storm was waiting. You have to understand what the sea between the homelands meant to these people, or the next part is just an accident, and it was never an accident to them. The Nords called themselves the sons and daughters of Kine. Kine was the storm, the goddess of wind and rain and the wide grey sky, the mother of men, the one whose breath upon the highest mountain in the world was said to have first made them out of the air itself. They were born from sky and weather. The rain, the old belief held, was Kine weeping. And when a Nord died, it was Kine who came for them, Kine who carried the dead up and away to the Hall of Heroes, which is why one of her oldest names was simply this, the kiss at the end. The storm made them. The storm mothered them. And the storm, in the end, came for every one of them and carried them home. So when their fleet was halfway across the deep water and the sky turned against them, the companions did not experience it as bad luck. They experienced it as their own mother turning her face. The storm that hit them was so total, so violent, that the songs gave it a name of its own. The storm of separation. It tore the fleet apart on the black water within sight of land. They were close now, so close to the northern coast, close enough to make it. The wind scattered the ships like leaves, and one of those ships was the Harak. The Harak was Ingol's, the elder son, the smith, the boy who had sat on a burning night beside his broken father and forged grief into an axe and given it a name about storms and tears. That boy was out there now, somewhere in the dark, in a storm, and his father could not reach him. The records say Ysgramor did not wait. He did not hold formation or count the cost or do any of the things a commander is supposed to do. He turned his own ship into the worst of it and went after his son alone, into the heart of a storm that was eating his fleet, shouting into the wind, demanding the sea give the boy back. He fought the water for his son the way only a father fights anything. For 2 long weeks the storm threw him along the jagged coast and would not break. And then it broke. And the dawn came up cold and clear over a quiet sea, and he found the Harak in the icy surf along the shore. The ship was there. Ingol was not. The longboat had washed up on the rocks, and Ysgramor reached it, and his son was dead. The whole crew was dead. The old belief said it was the sea ghosts that had taken them, the drowned things that gave the Sea of Ghosts its name, the cold and hungry dead that wait in that water. But the Nords knew, underneath the story, what had really happened. The storm had taken him, their own mother goddess, the one who made them out of weather, the kiss at the end. She had come for Ingol in the middle of the sea and kissed him and carried him away, and his father had been right there, close enough to scream, and could do nothing. Ingol was the first of the children of the sky to die in this new land. Out of 500 warriors who crossed an ocean to make a home, the very first to fall belonged to the Harbinger himself, his own son, the boy who had made the axe. Now go back to that deck on the burning night, when a grieving son put a weapon into his father's hands and named it Wuthrad, Storm's Tears. He chose that name for the grief of a city on fire. He chose it before he had ever heard of a storm of separation, before there was a sea named for ghosts in his story, before the wind had any reason to mean anything personal to his family at all. He looked at the worst night of his father's life, and he named the axe after weeping and weather, and he handed it over, and he had no idea. He had named the storm that would kill him. He did not know. No one could have. He had only looked at the worst night of his father's life, reached for the truest word he had, and set it on the axe, and handed it over, and walked the rest of the way to his own death, carrying nothing but the future. From that morning forward, every elf and every giant that fell to Ysgramor across all the years of war he had left fell to an axe called Storm's Tears. And the man swinging it knew exactly what the name had become. It was no longer a beautiful, sad word about a burning city. It was his son. It was the storm that took his son. It was the last thing his living boy ever made for him. And he carried it into every battle of the rest of his life. And its name was the name of the thing that killed the Maker. Not a weapon of triumph. A father, holding the only piece of his son he had left, swinging it at the world. He buried Ingol in the old way, In his grief, the songs say, Ysgramor slew a dozen beasts and burned them in his son's honor, the smoke going up into the same sky that had taken him. An offering, or an accusation, it is hard to say which. And then he dug a barrow hill in the Atmoran tradition, the round green mound his ancestors had always raised over their dead, on the shore where a great river met the sea of ghosts. He laid his son down inside it with the proper rites, among his own clansmen, far below the rocky head of land where the fleet had finally come ashore. And then he stood up and turned around and went to go win the war his son had died on the way to. And he won it. That part is true, and the songs are right to sing it. The 500 came ashore at last, and they retook Sarthol from the elves, and then they did not stop. They drove the elves out of the north, and then out of the center, and then they chased the survivors across the whole of the land over years and years, generation into generation, until the great elven civilization that had ruled this country since before men existed was broken and scattered and driven underground and into legend. But here is the part the victory songs do not dwell on. They thinned. 500 is a number that only ever shrank. The fighting never confined itself to the elves. There were giants in the high country, older and stronger than anything the companions had faced. And the worst of them the songs call Sinmur, who killed companion after companion before they could bring him to bay. Warriors whose names the songs still keep, stalwart Valder, sly Hakra, men who had crossed an ocean and survived a storm and outlived their own friends only to fall in the dark of a giant's barrow at the very end. Ysgramor went in after Sinmur himself, and the song lingers on one image, the axe Vuthrad, gleaming in the blackness, still in his hand, still doing the only thing it had ever truly been made to do, carry a father through one more grief, and out the other side. He came out of those wars painted blue with giant's blood, and that, the old detail says, is why the Nords paint themselves for battle to this day. Every warrior who has ever streaked his face blue before a fight wears, without knowing it, the memory of that grief-maddened campaign. But there is something the victory songs do not tell you about the city he would build when it was over, and it is the thing that tells you everything about what the war actually cost him. The crews broke off one by one to forge their own paths across the new land, and they fell to elves, to giants, to the years themselves. Ysgramor's closest friends, the crew of the Jorvaskr, the men he had grown up with, the ones who beached their own ship and turned it into a mead hall that still stands as the heart of the companions to this day. By the time they settled, only 22 of them were left. 22, out of a crew that had set out whole. And in time, even those 22 grew old and died because they were mortal, all of them, and the songs say it gently. In time, all of them came at last to the Hall of Heroes. 500 names, and not one of them got to keep the home they won. And then there is the city. When the war had mostly burned itself out and the land was, at last, his, Ysgramor stood where the White River pours into the sea of ghosts and decided to build a great city there. A monument to mankind, the songs call it. But look at where he built it, and how. He built it directly across the water from a low green hill, Ingol's Barrow, so that from the windows of his palace he could see his son's grave every day for the rest of his life. And he built it, the records say, as a tower over the very winds, to show man's dominion over the storm that had killed his son. He raised a black stone palace into the sky to spite the weather. He raised it, specifically, to prove he was stronger than the thing that beat him. He was not stronger than it. No one is. But grief does not care what is possible. Grief builds anyway. And it was built, that beautiful, spiteful city, by elven slaves, captives forced to raise it in the style of their own people, and as many of them are said to have died building Ysgramor's monument as had died at his hands before it. The city of a father's grief went up on the bones of the enemy whose own kind had taken his first home from him. The grief just kept multiplying outward in every direction it could find, and it would not be finished even when he was. He thought he was building a monument to mankind. He was building a place to watch a grave. Now we come to the things almost no one notices, and they are the ones that have stayed with me the longest. The first is about that great city, and about the man who carried writing into the world. Because Ysgramor did something in those last decades that mattered more than any battle, he became the first historian his people ever had. He took the principles of the very elves he had spent his life destroying, and he used them to build a way to write his own language down. He invented, for the children of the sky, the means to keep a name after the person was gone. Think about why a man like that, at the end of a life like his, would suddenly need that more than anything. He had watched a city burn with everyone inside it. He had buried a son who would have no children to remember him. He had watched 500 names dwindle toward nothing. The man who could not save anyone he loved spent his old age inventing the one tool that could keep them from vanishing completely. Every one of these old songs, every single one, exists because a grieving father could not bear for the dead to go unspoken. And to this day, at the feast his people hold for the dead, all 500 names are still read aloud. Every year, the named and the lost, the heroes and the boy who drowned before the war even started. He made sure the names would outlive the people. It is the only kind of saving he had left. The second thing is about where he chose to lie down. Ysgramor had a tomb built for himself, an enormous one, deep beneath that black palace, fit for the greatest king his people would ever have, right there in the city he raised, across the water from his son, was ready. It was waiting, and when he died, he refused it. He did not want to be buried in his city of triumph. He did not even want to be buried beside Ingol, in the end. He had himself carried to a lonely barrow on the far northern shore and laid to rest facing out across the sea of ghosts, facing north, facing away from everything he had built and won, facing the one direction that led home, toward Atmora. Because by then, Atmora was dying. While the companions had been conquering a new world, the old one had been freezing solid behind them. The green elder wood, the land of truth, the first home of all mankind. A cold had come over it that the songs call the frostfall, and it did not stop. The forests died. The cities went dark. The people who had stayed behind, who had not followed Ysgramor south, simply ran out of warmth. There is a tale the sailors of the north still tell, of the very last ship ever to leave Atmora. Its oars manned by frozen corpses, a few survivors still barely living among the dead, the deck so cold it numbed the feet of anyone who boarded it, even in high summer. And the tale says a snow elf child, a small girl in a thin gown, untouched by the cold, came to that last crew before they sailed and gave them a message to carry away. The frost, she told them, was the answer to the war. With the frostfall, we have now slain yours. She said of their homeland, the harvest, she called it, that their fathers had sown. Some who heard the tale scoffed at it. If the elves could freeze a whole continent, they asked, why had they not simply frozen Ysgramor and saved themselves? It is a fair question. No one truly knows why Atmora died. Maybe it was vengeance. Maybe it was only the slow turning of a cold world. But it does not change the shape of the thing. While Ysgramor built a city to keep one grave in view, the entire homeland behind him, the place all of it had started, the green country his people fled and meant someday, somehow to return to, quietly turned to ice and stopped answering, and was lost. No more ships came out of the north. There was nothing left up there to send them. So the old king, at the end, made his choice. He could be buried facing the son he had managed to bring home and bury with his own hands. Or he could be buried facing the home he could never bring back at all. He chose to face the loss he could not fix. He turned for eternity toward the frozen dark, toward dead Atmora, toward the door that would never open again. Not stone. A vigil. That is what the whole city was. That is what the whole life was. So go back, one last time, to the man at the window. We started there, and now you can see it for what it is. He is not a conqueror surveying his empire. He is a father, in the only home he has left, performing the smallest possible ritual, looking out to make sure the green hill across the water is still there, the way you check, in the dark, on someone you love who cannot be lost again because they are already gone. The axe in his hand is not the symbol of his triumph. It is the last thing his living son ever gave him, and its name is the name of the storm that took him, and he has carried it through every day of the war that took the rest of his life, because putting it down would have meant putting him down. He built a city to keep a grave in view. He built a written language to keep the dead from vanishing. He raised a tower against the sky itself to prove he was stronger than the wind, and he was not. And he knew he was not. And he built it anyway. This is what the strongest grief actually looks like. Not a battle. A man who could conquer the whole world, arranging that entire world, its cities, its borders, its language, its dead, around a single window, so that he would never have to stop looking at the place where he laid his boy down. He did not set out to build the first kingdom of men. He set out to bury his son somewhere he could see him. And the empire, the great bridge, the black palace, the written word itself were only what a grieving father of his size left behind on the way to that one window. And here is the small thing to carry out of all of it, the thing that has nothing to do with elves or axes or frozen continents. We do this too, not on his scale, but we do it. We build our lives quietly around the people we have lost. We keep a chair the way it was. We take the long way past a certain house. We turn without ever deciding to, toward the losses we could never fix, and we keep them in view, because keeping them in view is the only way we have left of keeping them at all. He just had a kingdom to do it with. The instinct was exactly the same as yours. If this story found you in the quiet hours and kept you company, you can follow along for more of them. The channel is here whenever the nights are long, and a like or a subscribe helps these stories reach the next person lying awake. For now, let the city go dark. Let the river slow to black glass under the snow. There is an old king at a high window, and across the cold water there is a low green hill, and he is watching over it the way the dead are watched over by the ones who could not let them go. The wind moves over the water. Somewhere far to the north, beyond the frozen sea, the elder wood sleeps under its ice and does not wake. And the storm, the mother of them all, the kiss at the end, gathers gently over the rooftops and begins, very softly, to weep its slow rain down over everything he built to remember them by. The hill is still there,